talking to Wayne Madsen of Wayne Madsen Report here in just a moment. As the news comes out, it turns out the FBI had been all over these two youth for 5 years, had sent them into the Caucasus, it appears, through the CIA to infiltrate groups. And that's the picture that is now emerging, and that the FBI called them before and after the bombing. The mother is now saying, I mean, when you've got parents immediately saying they were set up by security services, the government was all over my kids, they either let them do this or they're handling them, and they thought they were part of a drill, and either or didn't plant bombs. And then you've got the government in damage control with a bunch of Saudi Arabians. You've got all of this going on. And so we're going to be getting Wayne Madsen's take on that right now. But this fits the exact same cutout we've seen over and over again. Before we go any further, don't forget that you can see InfoWars Nightly News every night at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, as well as see the live video feed of the 3-hour live radio show that you're listening to right now by subscribing to prisonplanet.tv. And why do we call it Prison Planet? Because by using these events, they are training us that when the government says everyone stay in your house, you have to. Or when the government says they're going to put checkpoints on the highway, you have to. The great threat is tyranny, not statistically terrorism, whether it's real or not. And again, 200+ people die a year from honeybee stings, according to World Almanac. Less than 50 die a year from terrorism. But they hype it up like it's the end of the world. Same thing with mass shootings. Less than 100 people die a year from mass shootings. More than half of those are gang-related. Less than 40 people that are actually in mass shootings that are innocents and not groups killing each other. And they try to use that to then guilt all of us and make all of us suspects. And that's what this is. Getting us to cheer our own servitude. So now more than ever, it is essential to support Infowars.com, to spread the word about the site. If you're watching us or seeing us on YouTube later, become a subscriber. One membership is $5.95 a month, and one membership can be used by 11 people simultaneously with the same username and passcode. So create a unique username and passcode that you can share, an original username passcode, and give it to friends and family. Way more than 11 can use it. That's simultaneously that can log in, see the films, read the books, see all the documentaries, the expanded extras, most of it in HD. And it can't be censored like YouTube and others are censoring us. At least it's harder for the system to do that. So again, you're supporting the very tip of the spear in real media. When you subscribe today. It's 10 years up and running. prisonplanet.tv or InfoWarsNews.com. And then give it as an e-gift to friends and family. Say, check this out. Here it is. And Kurt Nemo's got a big article coming out soon with a whole boil down with their intelligence connections. And that ties in with Steve Watson's article, Mother of Suspected Bomber Claims FBI Called Eldest Son After Bombing Before Fatal Shootout. British media report claims FBI spoke with Tamerlan and said they knew he'd carried out the bombing. And that is being reported by Channel 4 News in Britain. Yeah, when the mother instantly said, intelligence services, they would not leave my son alone. And these guys are playboying around and traveling into Tajikistan and all these places and hanging out with groups funded by the CIA. I mean, this is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. And again, you can also find that article at planetinfowars.com. But if you guys punch up my screen, I'll actually show viewers right here. Again, Infowars.com, and you click on the top link, Mother of Suspected Bombers Claims FBI Called Eldest Sons After Bombing Before Fatal Shootout. Now remember, the whole family, everything the family said Thursday, early Thursday morning hours, I guess it was already Friday morning, they said that, my son is set up. These are not our, they didn't do this. They've been harassed for 5 years by the FBI. This is intelligence services setting them up. And then it comes out for 5 years they've been doing this. And 2.5 years ago, they met with them again when the Russians wanted it on record that, hey, we know these guys work for you. So the FBI had to act like they were doing something. And now, here's the big issue. We have the FBI when they knew full well who they were. And if we confirm they were talking to them on the phone, we've got them. In the middle of the drills and all the other suspects. We're going to get Wayne Madson's expert take on this in about 1 minute. They were on the news saying, we don't know who they are. Help us learn who they are. When they knew full well who they were, it's been confirmed. They knew who they were, and they had a press conference and said Thursday night, here they are. This is the only person you look at, and they're now in the Washington Post and a bunch of other publications saying the alternative media almost screwed up our investigation. They shouldn't have access to photos and videos from surveillance cameras or the public's info in the future. Great, you're going to put cameras up everywhere and still blow stuff up and blame patsies and then say we shouldn't have access to it because we're bad. It was citizens that found your patsy after your lockdown was lifted. You couldn't find him to kill him. And just like you did the brother. And so you lifted it going, okay, let the slaves find it. But then the media could then move the media you'd threatened to kill, so they got a bird's eye view so you couldn't finish the killing. Now you're drugging him up out of his mind to confess he did it, just like the so-called Aurora shooter. Now, Wayne Madsen has worked at the National Security Agency. Before that, he was in submarine warfare. And if you watch C-SPAN, you always see him there in national security meetings in the press gallery. And he works at there in D.C., gets a lot of intel at the National Press Club. I have found Wayne Madsen's intel to be so devastatingly accurate that I just don't think we blow trumpets when he comes on. He deserves a drum roll. He travels all over the place to cover these events. He has impeccable sources in a climate where they're arresting whistleblowers and media people left and right. And he has a lot of courage. And WayneMadsonReport.com is his website. Wayne, I don't know your take on this yet. So all of us will now get your take on it here today. But am I wrong in saying there's a cover-up A, and this has the classic signs of another provocateur patsy event? Wayne Madsen.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It actually gets deeper than just what's happened over the last week or so. You go back to 1994 when the Russians and Chechens fought this very big civil war, very deadly civil war. The U.S. began recruiting Chechens with the idea that we would support Chechnya's independence from Russia. And things didn't go too well because many of these Chechens eventually were Wahhabized by the Saudis and became these jihadists. And eventually they wound up fighting us in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're fighting in Syria right now on behalf of the rebels, who, of course, we're supporting. I think.
And historically, this is the one of the most warlike areas of the world. These people are tough as nails.
Yeah. Well, when things got bad after some deadly terrorist attacks by Chechen terrorists in Russia, a movie theater in Moscow, a high-speed train between Moscow and St. Petersburg, the Moscow airport, and several others, metro stations in Moscow, the Russians really cracked down. So what we started to see is the CIA started bringing over a whole bunch of political asylum. And many of these people, I call them professional refugees, including the Tsarnaev family. The Tsarnaev family, the young boy first came over here in 2002, apparently got his residency, his asylum.
By the way, I'll just say it off a gut feeling. The dad looks like a classic intelligence operative. He just screams James Bond type. What do you say?
Well, yeah, and I'll get to Uncle Ruslan later when it comes to that. But the Zohar got this asylum in Arlington, Virginia. Well, we know what is headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. Every defense and intelligence agency you can imagine. That was in 2001. Then the older brother comes over. But what I've discovered is that Boston and the Washington, D.C. area are the two centers for Chechen refugees, many of whom who got political asylum in the United States. In the case of Boston, that's a very tight-knit group. One of their kind of unofficial leaders is the former, quote-unquote, foreign minister of independent Chechnya, Ilyas Akhmedov. Now, when he first applied for citizenship, the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department said, no, we have information that links him to terrorist attacks in Russia. So we're not going to give asylum to a terrorist. Well, who weighs in? Now, you've heard over the last couple of days who's been arguing that this kid, Johar, should be tried in a military commission. He should have his citizenship taken away, which was granted last year on September 11th. Who's been arguing this but John McCain? John McCain and his good friend there, Miss Lindsay from South Carolina.
Yeah, Miss Lindsay, because they don't want this info getting out.
Exactly. So how do you suppress evidence? You do it through a military commission. You get these guys waylaid to Gitmo, and you know, nobody's going to hear all the details.
Well, what about the fact that the mother says, and it looks like that it is the older son, Tamerlan, on the video, and then now the witnesses are saying they ran him over with a car and then shot him up full of holes, and then they tried to kill the other one. They want these guys dead.
Yeah. Well, when I saw him laying on a slab in the morgue, I could only think of Qusay and Uday Hussein, you know, Saddam Hussein's sons, who we laid out on a slab, and we broadcast those photos, gruesome photos, around the world. But John McCain was one of the people who argued for giving political asylum to Ilyas Akhmedov, this guy who the Justice Department, Homeland Security said no. They eventually overruled it. He had a high-priced lawyer in New York arguing for
Just
him.
like the CIA ordered the Jeddah Saudi Arabian embassy to let the 15 hijackers back in, even though they were flagged as terrorists. They told them these guys are really CIA.
Exactly. So we have all these Chechens coalescing around Boston and Washington, and who takes on the Chechen cause? Well, every neocon who you can think of. People like James Woolsey, the former CIA director, Madeleine Albright, good old McCain. They even got Ted Kennedy because the law firm who represented this guy Akhmedov, Sergeant Shriver, Kennedy's brother-in-law, was a partner, a senior partner.
Now, I understand you're giving us all the connections. Bottom line, what do you think really happened here? Because they were getting ready to blame it on the Tea Party. They said we have somebody arrested. They were going to be at the courthouse. Then they shut that down. They acted very panicked. Don't look at these other photos, the FBI said. That's word for word. Only look at these. Now, the mother says they were calling him before and after the bombing and then right before the fatal shootout. What is your inside intel on Capitol Hill?
They needed another dramatic, not as big as 9/11, but they needed something to spur on the passage of this CISPA Act. I call this the Patriot Act for the Internet. This is going to give the law enforcement intelligence carte blanche access to everybody's interaction with anything electronic.
And to plant stuff on you. More important, to plant stuff on you.
Yeah, and then we had the ricin attack instead of anthrax. That was the same playbook. Stuff sent to Congress, to the White House.
So it's a CIA playbook, or who would you say is involved?
I can't even say it's the CIA's playbook anymore. I think it's these same people. You look at the people that back these Chechen refugees in Boston and D.C. It's this project for the New American Century crowd.
It's a neocon operation?
Neocon operation. They never went away. As a matter of fact, they're still in the Obama administration. They were consulted by the Obama administration.
Yeah, I was looking. One company is set to get $10 billion off this CISPA thing, spying on us. We're talking about $100 billion over the next 5 years spying on us. So they're also going to charge us to read our mail.
Oh, absolutely. And then you got all these other little things at play, like charging people who enter the United States over land borders a fee, as they do with airports right now and seaports. So, you know, there's a lot of people who have their hands out. They're looking at making some money here, contractors, DHS.
What about the operation itself? I mean, clearly...
Well, I believe the operation. So you have these like private security contractors there. This Kraft International that was headed up by this guy Kyle, who was shot back on Groundhog Day, February 2nd, by his colleague, who they said suffered from PTSD.
And by the way, now they're trying to claim those are National Guard. There were some National Guard dressed the same, but there were people wearing Kraft hats there as well. You
could tell the difference between that. National Guard were wearing the camouflage uniforms, and the Kraft guys were wearing these khaki pants and these vests.
And were they just used as well as a smokescreen? So there's so many black backpacks, cops would never be able to stop the real guys?
Well, either the backpacks were diversionary, or one their backpacks contained some of the explosive devices. It's hard to say, but we do know that there was a bomb drill going. And once again, here's a drill taking place. It's always a drill.
Why do they run the exact same playbook over and over again? Because it works.
It works. It works, and they already know the corporate media is in their pocket, and they're not going to ask any questions. Well, a few British papers are, and I guess in Russia, some media in Russia's taking a close look at that, not accepting everything that's coming out from the corporate wires and over the corporate networks. But they know they can get away with it. They've gotten away with it so many times in the past. Oh, why fix something if it ain't broke? That's the way they're looking at it. So they're going to use the same thing. They'll change it. They have to change it. Anthrax to ricin. No more buildings being taken down by controlled demolitions and blaming it on airplanes.
Sure. Let me ask you this. Do you think it's accurate to say that this thing unraveled spectacularly? And they're now, what is it the FBI doesn't want us to look at in all the other photos and videos that they're so scared of?
Well, I think what they don't want anybody to know is that, as being reported, you just mentioned it, that the FBI had contacts with at least the older guy, Tamerlan Tsarnaev. And the other thing, we got to look at Uncle Ruslan. When I first saw the news crews out of Washington up in Montgomery Village, Maryland, we know that the Tsarnaev's father over in Dagestan apparently was an auto mechanic when he lived in Massachusetts. Well, he obviously didn't make a lot of money. But you look at that guy's house, Uncle Ruslan, in Montgomery Village. I know that area. They're expensive homes. There's $600,000 homes up there.
The uncle, the dad, all of them come off like extremely smooth operators. Like if I saw one of those guys walking down the street, and I've learned how to recognize them, I'd go, oh, that's a real intelligence operative, not one of the fake ones. And let me tell you, the dad immediately said it's intelligence services and looks mad and says my sons have been set up, and he comes off very authoritative. And they were saying this instantly, because I guarantee you, being connected to the Chechens and the State Department bringing them over here, these people, the whole family's probably operatives.
Well, they also said that the family may have lived in Kazakhstan for a while. Now, Uncle Ruslan, it turns out he's a graduate of Duke Law School. He's a lawyer. He's worked for Arthur Anderson, and he also now works in the big oil business. He works for Big Oil for Kazakhstan, a big producer and exporter of oil. And the company he's with now is Big Sky Energy, and they're a holding company. Oddly enough, Big Sky Corporation is out of Calgary in Canada, but the holding company is located where? Little Rock, Arkansas. Now it rang a bell with me, because wait a minute. What former president is in tight with the Kazakhstan government and has been accused of help covering up all the, illegal bribes being paid to by Western companies to the dictator over there, Mr. Nazarbayev, but Bill Clinton. And here we have this big energy company that does all its business in Kazakhstan, relocated its headquarters to Little Rock, of all places, where the Clinton Foundation is located. And the Clinton Foundation has been getting big donations from where? Kazakhstan.
Exactly. So they're helping out.
Yeah. Why does the FBI not want to go? They don't want to look at any further, because you know what? The FBI is law enforcement for the wealthy in this country.
That's right. They're there. I don't even think the FBI is involved in the attack so much, because this looks more like an intelligence op. The FBI will just get patsies and then bust them before they do it, usually, unless it's the first World Trade Center attack. With these intelligence agencies, though, they'll have the multiple groups there as fallbacks. Now, what about the Saudi Arabian connection? Because it has been confirmed the White House is involved in a cover-up. It turns out this guy's got a bunch of family on terror watch list. Or is this just a rabbit trail?
It could be, but look, we have to look at the Saudis, because they have been very active in Chechnya and radicalizing the Chechen Muslim population. And so if anyone may have been involved in radicalizing old Tamerlan there, it may have been these Saudi groups. So we can't let them off the hook. But we also, the other thing I want to point out here is that this whole a Chechen operation may be an attempt also to embarrass Vladimir Putin, because we know that the Russians asked us for information on Tamerlan, and the FBI said, Well, we asked them why. Give us more information. Well, Putin's not dumb enough.
Well, they said we think he may be connected to these events, but I want you to finish your point. But
Yeah.
isn't that how the Russians tend to blow somebody's cover, is open a public file on them?
Right, and the Russians aren't dumb enough to, you know, when the FBI said, well, give us more information, give us more information, they're not going to give away their sources either, because if we get their sources, the FBI, of course, is going to pursue them.
Well, I looked it up. You've got $1 billion in the last 15 years or so going into those stands to actually bring the Wahhabists in and train them. I mean, the problem is Saudi Arabia and the globalists, and now look at how the U.S. is using Saudi Arabia to put al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria. And I predict they're going to shoot down jet airliners with heat-seeking missiles, and then take our rights when our government gave it to them.
And then we had the national security, the foreign affairs advisor to Netanyahu on stating, it's according to Haaretz, the Israeli newspapers, he said, this Boston Marathon bombing is good for Israel. Well, that's just like what Netanyahu said after 9/11. He said it on Fox News. This is very good for, you know, everybody's winning out with these terrorist attacks against the United States, except the American people. We are being played for chumps. Everybody's making a killing. From Saudi Arabia to Israel to these Mujahideen rebels that are fighting in Syria and fought Gaddafi. The only people who are getting messed over here is us, because we're the ones.
Sure.
We're the people that are getting the legs blown off and having our kids killed in Boston and everywhere
and
else.
Record suicide of the troops that nobody wants to humanize or personalize. What do you make? What do you make of Ahmed, n.d.a.a and the things he's up to? How does Hezbollah tie into this? Because we know that's a real group actually run by Iran. What do you expect them to do? Will the media try to blame them somehow?
Yeah, they'll try. Yeah, but look, Ahmadinejad condemned this. I did the Ayatollah Khamenei. They condemned this, and they said, while we condemn this act of violence, you know, hey, how about looking at some of the other acts of violence the United States is involved in sponsoring around the world?
Sure. So let's shift gears now to the president of Afghanistan, Mohammed Karzai. That's a big deal that he came out and said the West runs al-Qaeda and Taliban and is staging bombings as a pretext for a police state. What does that signify?
When did he wake up and start smelling the Afghan coffee? You know, I mean, he of all people should know about our links with the al-Qaeda and the Taliban, because when he was in exile, he was sitting there in Pakistan and here in this country and witnessing those connections. So, you know, I'm glad he's come out and said it. But you know, let's see how long he remains in power. My feeling is that Karzai is, you know, some people's patience is wearing thin with this guy. And, you know, we do know that when the Soviets controlled Afghanistan, you know, a lot of Afghan leaders would wind up with bullets in their head and, you know, being strung up in the central square of Kabul. Let's see how long it takes for our guys to get around to, you know, taking care of Mr. Karzai.
Just like they did Pat Tillman. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Look, how long can the globalists openly run al-Qaeda while, I mean, publicly running al-Qaeda, like the war on drugs? Publicly, they run the drugs, and that's public. Congressional hearings, studies, CIA Solicitor General in '96. How long can they do this where they run the terrorists publicly and then take our liberties using the terrorists to threaten us that they run? I mean, how long can this go on? Isn't it beginning to wear thin and people know about it?
Well, look, we got to have people back in Congress like we had back in the 70s that had the gumption to stand up and ask these questions. You know, we had the Senator Frank Church that went after the CIA. We had Congresswoman Bella Abzug and Congressman Otis Pike from New York. Both of them were from New York. We had people in Congress that asked the tough questions. And look, even in the case of letting these Chechens into the country, back when there was this opposition to letting this Akhmadov and these Chechens in, two members of the Congress, of the House, voiced their objections. They got overruled. One was Jim Sensenbrenner, who was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and one of his subcommittee chairs, John Hostetter from Indiana. Now, I think we should revisit both Sensenbrenner and Hostetter and say, what possessed you to say no to giving these Chechens asylum, and who But why did you say we shouldn't? Why were you supporting initially the Justice Department's refusal to let him in? And I think Sensenbrenner's still around. I don't think the other guy is Hostetter, but they must have had information that led them to believe. Both of them Republicans, by the way. And this was the Bush administration. They were fighting.
I'll tell you what, stay there. Do 5 more minutes. I want to ask you about the elephant in the room when we come back.
I'm Darren McBreen, and these are some of the new items that are available now at InfoWarsShop.com. Alert the public to Obama's blatant abuse of power with the new Obama t-shirt. Obama's Joker face on the front and come and take it on the back. It's time to publicly call him out for what he is, a tyrant. Defend the Second Amendment with our top seller Come and Take It t-shirts. And look at that, women's cut tank tops and t-shirts now available. Nice hat. Plus the Don't Tread on Me flag. And now you can become a micro distributor of the InfoWars magazine. Plus, get your own copy delivered right to your door each and every month. And if you're tired like I am of you and your family being exposed to polluted drinking water, get the Pro One high performance water filter. It gets rid of all pathogenic bacteria, cyst, fluoride, heavy metals, and numerous other contaminants. So join the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
Going back to Wayne Madsen, I've been throwing in a lot of points here so we cover all the bases and all the angles. Here's the big elephant in the room. They said they didn't know him, put their photos out, and now it turns out they've been all around him for 5 years. The family's saying it's intelligence agencies setting him up. The family, again, looks pretty well-informed, to say the least, looking at these people and their body language and the things they say. They're smooth operators. And, you know, is there any probability that they could be double, triple agents like the Israelis are saying that turned against the West and did a real bombing? Yeah, maybe 1 in, 100? 1 in 200? Or do you disagree with that? But what about the fact that we know they knew him for 5 years, not just 2.5, and the mother says they were calling him right after the bombing and right before the shootout, and they're acting like there's a cover-up? Don't we have them when the FBI is saying, here are these photos, who is this? When it was well known to the FBI, doesn't that prove right there? And if they were patsies, why didn't they go after him day one? I think they were fallback patsies. They were going to blame the Tea Party on this. Wayne Madsen.
Well, I'll tell you, you know what I'm reminded of? Mohammed Atta. You know, he was seen at Maxwell Air Force Base, where they knew him as Lieutenant Colonel Atta, the Egyptian Air Force. He was involved in being a drug mule as well. He was involved with unsavory people. He was on Jack Abramoff's casino boats a couple days before 9/11. He was clearly working for our intelligence operations. So, hey, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, meet Mohammed Atta. It's just another one of these. I think you're right. Tsarnaev, the older one, was a patsy. I'm beginning to think the younger one, Johar, was just, tagging along with Big Brother, and, he had other interests, but,
Oh, he had BB guns with him. I mean, it was...
Yeah, this kid was just tagging along with Big Brother, who he obviously must have looked up to.
Yeah, they wanted the Big Brother dead. That's who they ran over and shot in the street and lied about, yeah.
Yeah, but the fact that the FBI... We know from the Russian government that we at least know that they were contacted. FBI was contacted by the Russian government about this guy, and they just sloughed it off. Now, why did not President Obama call Bob Mueller, the FBI director, into the Oval Office and said, "You guys screwed up here. I want your letter of resignation on my desk by this afternoon"? Because Obama holds no one accountable. He's never held one person in his administration accountable. That's a real flaw in his leadership.
I agree. Bottom line, Benghazi, giving Al-Qaeda 10,000 heat-seeking missiles. What's the point of that? What's at the bottom of Benghazi?
Oh, well, here we go again. The U.S. Being found to support the Mujahideen. We had, there were Chechens fighting in Libya as well. And now some of the Libyans are all fighting in Syria. We're keeping this conflict, it's called the...
strategy of tension.
strategy of tension, clash of civilizations. These are all neocon terms. We got to keep that going because there's no more, communist bloc. Now there's this terrorist axis of evil nonsense, and they got to keep it alive. And I think why they pulled off the marathon bombing is, look, they started letting people go on airplanes now with some, pocket knives.
Yeah, they did this to sell $100 billion in robots and armored vehicles and train. That was martial law in Boston. They're training us to accept that.
Oh, by the way, the front page of the Lebanese English language newspaper, the Daily Star. I'm going to try to get this photo out. But there's the other day they ran a photo when they were going door to door and pulling people out of their homes in Watertown, Massachusetts. There is a picture of a police officer with a gun drawn on a lady who has her hands up as she's coming out of her home. I don't know if you've seen this photo.
Oh, no, we have video. We have video up at Infowars.com. Wayne Madsen, I want to get you on for a full hour in the next week to really break down the whole geopolitical. WayneMadsenReport.com. Thank you so much, Wayne Madsen. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.